lawyer and a financial advisor walk into a bar.
And then what happens, Dave?
Well, the question comes up about estate planning.
Estate
It's a bit
planning.
morbid, but it's like...
Isn't it? Is that like a will? You just have a will and you're done?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? People don't understand. I mean, the concept of estate planning documents, what is it? What are they?
Yeah.
What should I do? Who should I put in them?
Yeah.
They all sound a bit too very legal orientated. Hence why we have a lawyer here today.
Yeah, well, and I'm not an estates lawyer. I'm a commercial lawyer, but I can tell you there's a big overlap. It's one of the big things that comes out for me as a commercial lawyer is people have a will which deals with their personal assets. So that's what they own personally. So often their house, that sort of stuff. But then they have, company assets. They run a business and the business is normally in a company or a trust or some other structure. And what happens with that? And that's often not dealt with the will at all. And for people who've been running a family business or a business for many years, that's their main asset. Their house is not their main asset. Their business is worth more.
Usually they would have passed that asset over to someone else for risk protection.
Right. Yeah, it might be the traditional sort of husband and wife, and the husband runs the business and the wife owns the house. That's the sort of the old-fashioned way of doing it.
Yep.
And now, of course, there's many ways of doing it, but ultimately there's a lot of value in the family home and maybe the holiday house, and there's a lot of value in the family business. They're the two valuable assets. And the will typically deals with personal assets, so your house, if it is in your personal name, and then other structures like your shareholder agreement, your buy-sell agreement, or whatever deals with what happens if you die or you're incapacitated, and what happens with your business, who controls it, who owns it. So that's really...
So let's just go back. You made an interesting comment at the start.
Yeah.
In that, so today, the topic that we're talking about is estate planning documentation. So you made the comment, you said, I'm not an estate planning lawyer, I'm a commercial lawyer, however, there is crossover. Right. So let's kind of get that distinction, because I have that discussion with a lot of people in that the query does. It's like, but I've got, Mary down the road, she's been a really good lawyer. She does my conveyancing for all my property purchases. She's done a few employment contracts and she's done all these other things. Why can't I just get her to do my will?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a great point.
Distinction between the two.
Yeah, and it's obvious to me, but it might not be obvious to everyone. I think, everyone, you need a commercial lawyer, you need an estate planning lawyer, and potentially, depending on what happens in your life, you might need a family lawyer too.
Correct. Or an employment lawyer if you...
Well, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So I don't want to get too carried away with how many lawyers you need, because that'll freak everybody out.
Never enough, really, for you.
Never enough. Yeah, we certainly have a lot of cases of people have their conveyancer who does their property transfers. They might buy and sell. Maybe they're involved in property development, whatever. They buy and sell things, but that's all that conveyancer does, and they lean on their conveyancer for more than they should. They lean on their conveyancer for some wills and estates advice, or it's like leaning on your accountant for your financial advice. People often do it, and it's there's limits to the amount you should do that.
Well, that's knowledge though too, isn't it? I mean, sometimes there's a little bit of that query around where you don't know what you don't know. So yes, it's law, but we're going down a particular path, especially if we're dealing with people with multiple entities and there's a bit of complexity in there.
Yeah, that's right. And people do. We've done a podcast about that. People often think, "Oh, I'm quite simple. That my life's simple." My father thought that, right? And he said, "Oh, I'm simple. I've got a house. I don't own a business. It'll be simple." But he's got 7 kids, right? And so there's 7. And actually,
different personalities.
He quite funnily he says, no matter whatever number you take, if you divide it by 7, the answer's a small number. So just be aware of that. Anyway, but people often think they're simpler than they are.
Yep.
There's often complexity. People have children from an earlier relationship. So you might want to provide for the children, which is different.
See, now we're getting into it, aren't we?
It all gets.
Oh so my God, this is where we really talk about estate planning.
Yeah. Well, that's right. But just on the point about lawyers, effectively an estate planning lawyer, so a wills and estates lawyer, they specialise in doing wills and dealing with estates. If someone passes away, and potentially disputes about estates. So they effectively go to them to draft a will and a power of attorney, and that deals with what happens to your personal assets and maybe your husband or wife's personal assets. If in the event that one of you dies or that both of you die, and so on. And typically you're handing it over to your children or whatever.
But Alex, I think we need to make the distinction, because people go, I've got a will or why do I need that? We take it a step prior to that. The numbers, I think, off the top of my head, it's like 3% of deaths is an immediate death.
Right.
Like a massive heart attack on the spot.
That's it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Or an accident of some
Yes.
shape or form. The majority of death is by a gradual decline through an illness.
Statistic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's actually quite a small percentage. So this goes back to support the argument around having a power of attorney available to yourself, because the power of attorney can help if you've granted it to someone. So you've allowed. So I've said I'm giving Alex Martin my power of attorney. So if I've lost capacity, clearly. Also, yes, we won't go into. Well, we will go into the distinction, but basically the issue then becomes I'm giving someone who can make decisions on my behalf. Right. If I don't have the capacity. Now, that may be mental capacity, but it may also be that I'm incapacitated in hospital and I can't do certain things. So I'm not deceased. So my will doesn't get triggered. It's someone to make those decisions. So it's that real importance of having those powers of attorney in place for you personally and for your corporate structures, as well as your personal assets in the will. And so I think that's a really important distinction for a lot of people to understand, because they go, I'll just, can't we just worry about it when I'm dead? I'm like,
that's right. And you're probably not just going to drop dead. You're going to get sick first. And that might mean a long period of being incapacitated one way or another. I see what you're saying. Or it'd be a long period of you being sick, but knowing, having capacity, but then at some point losing it, or possibly losing it for a while and then regaining it, as people do.
Yes.
And we've got a case actually at the moment of a couple of daughters who their father runs a trucking company, and Dad's been running it on his own more or less for many years and knows lots about trucks, knows how to change a truck tire and all that, and then he's gone to the nursing home. He's got sick, gone to the nursing home, and then the nursing home have actually made an application to court to declare him incapacitated, to say that he doesn't have capacity to make decisions, because they've formed that view. And so then suddenly the girls are having to run his business, and there's no powers of attorney, there's no training. That's a whole nother story that they're really. They were trying to change the truck tire. I was on the phone to them. They're saying, "Do you know how to change a truck tire?"
I'm not sure that. Let me look up Google.
Yeah. And by barely, I mean I couldn't at all.
That's called, I'll delegate that job. It's called the phone number.
Yeah. So let me just talk a little bit about powers. So you've got a power of attorney for medical. So that's where, you've got to make medical decisions about yourself. Someone else makes it on your behalf. And then there's a separate power of attorney for financial. So you make decisions, to go into the bank and transfer money and that sort of stuff. And you can have the same person do both, but you can have different people do both, based on you kind of who you think might be the right person. I know in my family, my sister, who's a nurse, has the medical for my dad, because she's someone who's sort of, well qualified or whatever. Yeah, that's right.
But I think also, because people are always a bit concerned about that, you can actually set your power of attorney up that can take effect immediately. So someone can do it on your behalf. You can do it based upon you've lost capacity, so it is only applicable with a sign-off from a medical practitioner that says you have lost capacity, or it can be as per your instruction.
So it can be for a period.
Correct.
It doesn't have to be forever.
Correct. So I think a lot of people misunderstand sometimes that the one is the extreme value of having a power of attorney in place. But the controls that you can still put around that. It's really important for people to feel comfortable that if I'm what they refer to as granting my power of attorney to someone who has to accept the capacity as well, you've actually got control.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives you more control, not less. There's this kind of sense that as soon as I sign a power of attorney, that I'll lose control of my own destiny. In fact, it's quite empowering. And you can, I know often people's, particularly mental capacity declines sort of gradually. And you can actually step in and help somebody manage their affairs. Maybe they're still making the main decisions, but you'll help. You go into the bank and get the money out for them, or pay their bills for them, or whatever. And having that, formal, because the bank won't look at you at all unless you've got a formal document, that's properly witnessed and all that in your hand when you go into the bank. So if you want to, do a few things for someone, or make medical decisions when they're unconscious, then, having the powers of attorney in place, give you a lot of more control over your own destiny, and you have the right person making the decisions for you, or just helping you make decisions,
Yeah. I mean, There's been a lot of talk as well. There is, because as we're getting an ageing population and mental capacity has diminished, there's also a lot of horror stories that I'm sure people, may make a comment, with the topic that we're talking about is estate planning documentation today in our podcast. Yes, there is this elder abuse component that says, oh, yes, a particular family member has the financial, especially power of attorney.
Yep.
And unfortunately, there are some circumstances where someone takes advantage of that.
Yep.
There may be a bank account that's got lots of money in it because an individual feels comfortable with cash. And so a member of the family, as much as they're trying to do the right thing for their family member, they're like, yeah, but it's going to come to me anyway. So I just borrowed a little bit from over here.
Yeah, that's right. And it's sort of my money anyway, which it's absolutely not.
So part of it, you can deal with it where you may have it jointly set up as a power of attorney for certain people. So you manage the risk even further. So again, I want to, make people feel comfortable that there are really good control mechanisms you can put in place through this process. Because that's the question that really comes about. How do I choose my executor? So the person that will manage my affairs when I'm deceased, but also who do I determine to be my attorney for my powers of attorney? Like that's
and that's a good distinction. There's your executor who they deal with your will once you pass, so when you're dead, and they don't have any powers until you're dead. So while you're still alive, they've got no powers. And then there's the two powers of attorney, the financial and the medical. And they could all be the same person, but they don't have to be. And they're while you're still alive, but you need help with your medical decisions or you need help with your financial decisions. And as you say, you can jointly do them. And I think often powers of attorney relating to financial are joint, so that somebody's kind of, there's two people.
It's just a second set of eyes on it, really.
Yeah. And executors are often joint. I'm the joint executor with my oldest brother for my father, and I think the idea he's the eldest and I'm a lawyer, so we both sort of have some spiritual but
I think
it's nice. I don't want that job. I'd rather someone else do that.
It is. It's one of those things, and this is where it's interesting because people need to understand that the importance of the executor is a really powerful role, and it's also a really important role. But also, people forget that. The obligation sits with the executor. So the executor needs to make sure that all of the affairs are in order before they start to distribute the proceeds.
Yes.
So you may be receiving some pressure from a beneficiary of the estate that says, no, can you just pay me out? If there is tax implications on the estate and the executor distributes those without keeping enough money within the estate to settle any outstanding debts or tax bills, the executor has the obligation. The liability will sit with the executor. Yeah. So it's very important for people to understand if you have an executor, you also want to make sure in the guidance that you provide to them, who can they go and receive professional advice from? How do they manage? Yeah. I mean, ultimately, the executor is the person that's sitting there that signs everything off because you've asked them to do that. However, in 99.9% of the cases, they will seek professional advice around what are the steps I need to take, how do we deal with it, and I would always err on the side of caution and say to anyone, I know you need to pay for the advice, but that advice comes out of the estate. It is appropriate to get the appropriate advice because that's the last thing you want to do is distribute an estate and then find that the executor, the ATO, comes back to you and says, oh, Alex is the executor. That estate still needs to pay us out, $100,000 in tax.
Yeah, for selling that property or whatever. And you
Correct.
Go, uh-oh. Yeah.
Can I get that back from the beneficiaries? Yeah, no, they might have spent that already.
Yeah, well, that's one of the benefits. I think, have a good wills and estates lawyer who, hopefully is with you in the long term. You can do your will with them and then they can advise you about what happens when the time comes or advise the executors or whatever. Yep. And I think there's a real practical side of this as well that you need to know who the who did the will. You need to have a copy of the will, or the executors need to have a copy, and the powers of attorney, and also just the practical contact details of someone who can help. Maybe the accountant. Often the accountant's the one with all of the information, the accountant or the financial advisor or whatever. So what accounts there are, what properties there are, what's actually out there.
But I think the other important point you said, a copy of the will. So what a lot of people don't realise, you can have a certified copy of a power of attorney, which is basically it's certified in a way that this is a copy of the original.
Yep.
So I can take that to the bank, but the original may stay in a safe somewhere.
Yep.
Here's a certified copy that all of and certain institutions will request a certified copy.
Yes.
Okay? So they keep that on file. The distinction with a will is that you can hold a copy so you know how to reference it, but ultimately you need the original will. So we have a process really that we run at the moment, and every state in the country is different with their powers of attorney. And
it's good times, isn't it?
It's like we're in a federated system. So you might hold some assets in New South Wales or Queensland or WA, but you live in Victoria. You need to make sure you cover off all of those scenarios. But we store all of our original wills now at the Will Bank in Victoria.
The old Will Bank. Yeah.
So because you need to know where the original will is. There is you've got to go through the courts if you cannot find it and you only have a copy. That's not enough, because then you've got to take the original will with all of the details of assets and liabilities and everything else and then have probate granted.
Yeah.
Which again, I can see people's eyes rolling in their head going, oh my God, what are all these things they're talking about?
Yeah.
Highlights the importance of seeking professional advice when this occurs.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you want to go along and get your will done properly. Don't do it yourself.
No.
Don't do it from the will kit. There's a lot of formal requirements, and if you don't meet the formal requirements, the will's not valid. And a not valid will is worth nothing at all. In fact, it just leads to dispute.
Yep.
So you want to have a proper will. Will needs to be witnessed by two, adult witnesses who are independent, right? So you need to, at the minimum to have two people there who are witnessing it, who aren't beneficiaries.
Yes, but so the other distinction with the will signing witnesses, they, as you said, one, they shouldn't be nominated within the will in any way, so they should be two independent witnesses as long as they're over 18. Now, for a power of attorney document, one of those wills needs to be a certified witness.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So the second witness can be someone over 18 and not nominated, but it needs to be a JP, so a Justice of the Peace, a lawyer. Yeah. There is a full list, but and that's a real distinction. And you need to make sure, they have the rules around making sure people are using the same pens and making sure, because it looks... And again... really simple things, but if there is a thought that someone says, hang on, that was signed not in front of the independent witness or any of these reasons that may give an ability for it to be challenged, that you want to make sure that you're blocking every avenue that someone says that was not done at the same time.
Yeah, but if you go to a wills and estates lawyer, they'll handle all that for you, and you know that you've
Correct.
got a solid situation for if and when you get sick and when you pass away, which the reality is going to happen to all of us, right?
Yep.
People go, it's a morbid topic, and we've sort of talked about this briefly before, but it's just a reality of life. Everyone's going to get sick and everyone's going to lose capacity and everyone's going to die. That's going to happen. Yep. So, the more that if you can plan for that stuff, then it means one less thing for your relatives to worry about or for you to worry about when you. And actually, I've had my uncle's was unwell suddenly recently. It turned out his medication he was on various medication, and one of the medications was causing him to have low sodium levels, which is very serious. And he was, hallucinating and falling over, and all suddenly, and he thought he was going to die, and he was panicking, and he was trying to get his lawyer in to update his will and do all sorts of stuff, right? And as it happened, his will was okay. He'd done his will through a referral that I'd given him, which is good. Same person who's done my father's will and done a whole bunch of my clients' will. So, but it just suddenly 1 minute, and then suddenly my uncle's off to see the wills and estates lawyer as well, because my other uncle, because he's seen seen what's happened to this guy. So it can all just happen very quickly and cause a lot of distress if it's not all taken care of.
And it takes time.
Yeah.
People forget. They might say, I want to quickly do that. I'm like, but have you thought of the implications if that occurs? And this is where it comes back into for certain families. I mean, you raised it before. So you may be in a blended family.
Yep.
You may have an estranged child.
Yep.
Or children.
Partner.
Yeah. Like, do you know what I mean? People forget, oh, well, we never really hear from them. Like, well, if you've got a reasonable estate, you actually may hear from them whilst you're not here. Like, it's that thought process around how do I deal with it. And there's various cases that have occurred around the country that, as much as, and this is where people I get an interesting one where we go, oh, but if it'll get challenged.
Yeah. Right. Well, there might be a challenge, but if you have proper advice, you minimise the risk of a challenge, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And as people say, if you don't have a will, you have a will because there is a government formula.
Yeah.
However, that means the government is giving the instructions about how your estate is to be.
Yeah, and it's much more difficult and takes a longer time for it all to happen. You're much better off with a will, even if you're giving the same instructions. I know. I always thought, once I die, my problems are over. Why would I need a will? And you just don't want to be creating extra stress for other people in your life if you can avoid it. And as you say, I mean, you're very, very likely to be ill for a while or whatever. You're not likely to just keel over and die. And so then your powers of attorney, and you'll be around suffering through whatever difficulty. And in fact, about the time point, that was a really good one. It does take a long time for your own to reflect on some of the decisions you need to make, to have the meetings with the lawyer or whatever it is. And my mum and dad were working on their wills. I referred that they were updating their wills. I think they'd had a whole bunch of kids since their last will, so they needed to update. And during that time when they were working on it, well, they drafted them, but they hadn't signed them off. My mum passed away. Right, she was ill. She had cancer and she died. Thankfully, most of her assets were held jointly with my father, and he survived. So they all went to him. But it really underscored that it takes time, and that you want to get started on these things early, because potentially, like if they both died, that would have been and there's 7 kids, that would have been a nightmare for us. And having her die. She died intestate, as they say, without a will, which was bad. And we'd started but the whole thing just took a long time because they went away for a couple of weeks to think about various issues. What did they want to do here? What did they want to do there? Did they want to set up a trust, or did they just want to distribute money? Whatever it is. Did they want to give away some money while they were still alive? There's a whole bunch of things to think through. And that it took a long time, and she died before she, and thankfully she sort of lost capacity, so she wasn't really aware. But if she knew that she was about to pass away without a will, she would have been ropeable.
Yeah.
She didn't want to leave problems after she died.
But I think you also made the point that you said a lot of your mother's assets were jointly owned by your father.
Right.
Now, that does simplify stuff, but there are a lot of circumstances, and I'm sure people listening, there'll be a lot of people where a particular asset, such as the family home, is not jointly owned. It is owned by one spouse, and if that particular spouse is deceased, that is a personal asset of that individual if it's owned in their name. Now, in that instance, the asset would not automatically come across to your father.
Right, yeah. And so then we'd be the beneficiaries or whatever it is. There'd be this difficult process for us all to deal with while we're grieving the death of our mum, which the last thing you want to be dealing with is bureaucracy and legal and seeing a lawyer and having a stressful time when obviously you're dealing with an immense personal shock, and so you want to be, free to as free as you can be to grieve and to do what you need to do with your family, not be worrying about what happens with the house and where does dad live in the meantime or whatever.
Correct.
So, So it was a real lesson for us. And I think the time, what did surprise me how long it took, not so much to prepare the documents, but for them to, make the decisions. That's something you can't really rush. Sometimes you want to, reflect on it, talk to your partner about it for a week or two. You don't want to be rushing into a lawyer's office and making a whole bunch of hurried decisions. You want to give it the time that it needs. And, they're older people who, built up wealth over their life and have been successful, had a lot of children. There are a lot of things to reflect on. And in fact, Dad quite enjoyed the process because he got him to reflect on his life and on his what he built and all that sort of stuff, So,
but there's also the other query that comes in for a lot of people. They say, okay, you're probably on. Well, I don't think you're on the extreme. There's certainly lots of families out there with, 6, 7, 8 kids. I know friends that are one of 10 and 12. Unbelievable. I mean, I'm one of 4 and I've got 4 kids. So it can also be a parent that may be sitting there that says, look, I have provided some financial support to one child specifically for a range of various reasons. It doesn't matter what those reasons are.
Yeah, sure.
But the parent might go, well, I kind of feel as though I've done a fair bit on that side, but how do I potentially equalise my estate distribution to the family? And that is also a challenge sometimes for the family to sort of get their head around the fact, or, is there an asset that may be owned that may have been passed from the parent's parent? So from the grandparent. So your grandmother may have passed an asset to your mother that she wants to pass down to you. Do you know what I mean? And so then how do you cascade some of those scenarios? So I try and encourage people to look at it from a perspective, as you've just said, your father had the opportunity to reflect upon his life.
Right.
I don't look at it as a negative scenario. This is just looking forward that sort of says, okay, I've got this opportunity. How do I distribute? But should I be distributing part of those proceeds now?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I can see my family enjoy the experience of me as an individual, the giving, but also for the gift receiver to see their joy of doing it. Like, it's not, let's not, why leave it to that traditional model of, I'll wait till I'm gone and then they can all get it. But you don't get to see the joy of people enjoying that experience of part of it might be helping them spend it, but at the same time, it can be passed across into such a beautiful way of, education to grandchildren, or a holiday as a family together.
Right. You might go away for someone's 60th or something.
Correct. And all of a sudden, it's like, what a great experience that there's no other way. I mean, you can turn around and say, great, I've got, so-and-so left $1 million in the bank account for me. Great. But I wish I'd gone on that holiday.
With them when they were alive.
Correct. I'd rather we have spent $100,000 of that on a holiday to go somewhere that they've always wanted to go to, and I got to take them to have that experience.
Yeah, my father is big on that, and he said, that ultimately, often in life, when you need money, you don't have it. Like when you've got a young family, you're struggling to pay the mortgage, you're struggling to build your business, all that stuff, and then maybe when you're 60, 70, 80, you've done well and your properties have all gone up and you've got plenty of money, but you actually don't need it at that point. And so then often you give it to your children, depending on the times, but you give it to your children when possibly they don't need it. You want to give it to them when it makes the most difference, when you sort of, a little bit of money at that time when you're first buying houses. And
can make a huge difference.
Give a deposit for a house or whatever. And similarly, my grandma used to say, I don't want you to come to my funeral. I want you to come and visit me while I'm alive.
Yes.
Same sort of attitude.
Absolutely. Like let's enjoy the time with these individuals. So again, I try and say to people that there's all sorts of things that you can do, and the whole estate planning process can be exciting.
And it is a nice opportunity for a legacy, right?
Absolutely. What is it? Especially if you've got quite a large estate, people can say, look, there's more than enough for the family, but I would like to set it up in a way that there is a corpus of proceeds that can be continuously invested to support the family going forward over multiple generations.
That's
We're seeing that.
We're seeing that when we see very successful family businesses that have been that have generated a lot of wealth. And the one thing you want that wealth is to make the family happy and spend time together, and not to create conflict, not to create jealousy, not to create, difficulties. And it's really one of the things that really upsets me the most about in my kind of business life is seeing successful business people with dysfunctional families who all are cranky at one another, and they've actually got heaps of money. And you think, the money's supposed to help you, have a better life, not create jealousy amongst you. It's just a sad thing to see. And poor estate planning is part of that. Obviously, there's bigger issues, relationship issues, and so on. But good estate planning really is a fundamental to trying to have a happy, long-term, intergenerational wealth and family. The other point I just wanted to say, but I know we're probably
about to close out. Yep.
Yeah, but is just the importance of the commercial structure separate to the personal. So although you might have personal assets, you've often got company assets. So you need to know if I die or I'm incapacitated, I'm the trustee of my trust, whatever it is. I'm the director of the trustee company, whatever it is. And if I'm incapacitated, what happens with that structure? And that's for a commercial lawyer to do. So you want to also, if you run a business, you want to be talking to your commercial lawyer about succession planning, and that's something again that takes some time, and that it might be a matter of just appointing a new trustee, and that might be your wife, or it might be your children, or whatever, or having a shareholder agreement or a buy-sell agreement that if you've got a couple of families in business together, you might have if one the director of one company passes away or is incapacitated, the other one might be able to buy them out, or there might be
which then tends to dovetail into your estate planning process.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Like the two of them have to be aligned. So if you've got instructions within your estate plan, you need to make sure that the commercial documents allow you to do what you want to do in your personal process. Like it's the two of them sit next to each other.
And I think often people, they just think the will's it all, but the will, if you say you run a company, you're the director of the company, if you die, then it's the company document, the company constitution or whatever, that deals with who becomes the new director, not the will. So you need to have, a shareholder agreement or the company constitution, whatever it is. You need your commercial lawyer to look at those things and make sure they all work together and that the right people. We've got quite a few clients where maybe they're owned by 2 or 3 families. So they're in sort of partnership, you might call it. And, if one of the key directors passes away or is incapacitated, then the others can buy them out, because they don't want to be. Otherwise, you're effectively in business with maybe the spouse of your ex-business partner.
And that's another whole conversation.
A whole other conversation that you might not want to be.
Yeah,
and your spouse probably has no interest in it. They just want the value for their shares. They want to be bought out, and they want to go on and grieve and live their life. And the business should continue. Even with someone, getting incapacitated or dying. So it's just...
All right. Well, we really got to kind of wrap it up on that one. Sure. So, I just think as we close out the conversation today, I want to thank Alex from Taurus Legal Management. He can be contacted via LinkedIn at Alex Martin or via the website tauruslawyers.com.au.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank Dave Murdoch, the wealth activist from Paxton Bridge, and you can contact him on LinkedIn or at paxtonbridge.com.
Beautiful. Thank you, Alex. Once again, bit of a banter, been a bit of pleasure. And if anyone's got any questions, please come back to us. Enjoy the rest of the day, and we shall talk at the next episode.
See you next time.